All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and call the meeting forward. We got a lot of work to do today. I do need to, identify a clerk. Is anybody feeling particularly excited?
I love the clerk role.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Okay, just so everybody knows, I think they probably do, but, our next meeting is on Monday, September 9th. Same place. And then I'm pretty sure everyone knows this, but I'll just mention it. The first public outreach meeting led by DCAN is scheduled for September 12th at 7 o'clock. That will be in the room to our left. That's it about that. Do we happen at the minutes from last?
No, those aren't available.
Yeah.
We will have to prepare for that meeting.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so I've mentioned this for people as they were coming in. Originally, Patrick is not going to be able to join us until later on in the meeting. And I was going to have him, this is how we sort of divided up our responsibilities, to lead the conversation about the subcommittee scopes and finding out board members. And I think because of a couple people's schedule, and I want as many people to participate as possible, I'd like to suggest that we flip-flop it and or actually do it in accordance with this schedule as opposed to waiting for Patrick, and then that's okay with everybody. So, not seeing any objections. I very much appreciate the comments that I received after the meeting. For me, they were very helpful. And I guess what we could, I don't know if everyone has had a chance to review them. Shannon was great at sending them out, collecting them and sending them out. I think maybe so my goal for today's meeting was twofold. One is to, if possible, to lead the meeting with an agreement on what the committees are, and whether it's 3 or 5, what they are, and what a rough scope, description of what the work will be. I fully expect and hope that those things, once the committees are formed, will get further fleshed out, and so it will be sort of continue to refine a little bit. And if possible, even if it's just maybe one person that puts their hand up or doesn't take a step back quickly enough, to sort of we'll know who's going to sort of lead, or someone's really excited about leading one of those. I know Patrick, for example, expressed interest in community outreach. So that's the one set of goals for outcome. Second thing is to obviously prepare ourselves for the review DCAM's agenda for the meeting. See if we're comfortable with that, if we want to add anything, subtract anything, and then also there's a section in there for us to if we want to spend a couple of minutes and talk about it. I'm hoping one of the things we will do is we'll talk about the formation of these subcommittees and identify who at least the chairs are, so that people in the audience, the public, knows, okay, in the future, this hopefully near future, there's going to be a meeting, and I'm interested in that, so they can stay focused on it. So unless there's any other comments on that, I think a way to do this, although I'm open to other people's suggestions, would be to walk through this edited memo dated on August 26th. Unless somebody has a high level thought about or proposal on, are we comfortable with the 3 that we sort of coalesced around towards the end of last meeting, or do we want to explore that a little further? And
okay, I guess I was confused, but there were some things that I thought maybe could be in these descriptions that I didn't find anywhere. So, for example, any consideration on transportation, and I see that's under legal government is, coordination with, DOT.
Mhm.
But just sort of general transportation as it is under land use and planning, I think maybe you also want to add some, like if we had to do a transportation study. Of the site or thought about, you know, should there be bike lanes?
Mhm.
Zoning requirements for walking paths, all that sort of thing. You have, I guess that's part of local zoning, and you don't need to highlight it, but
No,
I didn't see it there. So that was, that's one point I have.
Yep.
Another point I have is for community outreach, the word used is marketing, potential occupants. And I don't know that Concord should be marketing. I mean, it seems to me that that is overstepping our bounds, but we could be doing market development or market assessments. And I think that would in parallel be appropriate in terms of what we can add to the process. And then also, then that would be also the, maybe incorporating financial analysis and, you know, financial feasibility. So I don't know if that should be under community outreach, but perhaps it should be there, to make that, have some balance with this, requirements. The other two have pretty heavy requirements in terms of what, they would be including. So those were, and then in terms of PR, would that I assume that includes talking to the press, so would that be part of that community outreach, or would that remain with the town manager's office, was just the question we had.
Yep.
So that, those are small comments.
No, I think they're great, and I think, I would agree with your observations. I can tell you my thoughts on that, the last question in terms of the community outreach. I think when I was thinking about it, I was imagining that would be something that happened under that reaching out to the press would fall under the community outreach.
Okay.
So now Megan and Shannon, Mark Mary may have a different idea, but that's how I got it to work. And in terms of your transportation comment, I very much agree with that. I think that is something that would sort of ideally would be surfacing in the discussion about land use and planning. And finally, on the question about the market analysis, I think of that also as demographics, just understanding the people that are going to come here and potentially use it. So I think that is absolutely the place where it belongs. And typically, in my experience, market analysis, that is where the economic development takes place. So all good observations. Scott or anybody else have any? Does that mean that we're, did anybody? Does that mean that we're sort of beginning to coalesce around this idea of three? Do people generally feel like we've captured the high level categories?
Yeah, I would agree. Those three.
Okay. Well, what I like about it is it's simple math. It kind of allows us to have 3 or 4 members, you know, which gives us some depth. So, all right. Well, do we need to vote on that? We just sort of agree that
So you said you're gonna add economic analysis to that?
economic under, I think,
Land under,
under land use planning strategy.
because I think that, I've expressed that before, I think it's really important to understand what are the cost benefits for Concord going forward, you know, what are the expenses in the long run, and what are the short-term expenses, and then what is the revenue generation aspects of this as well for us.
It makes sense to me because when we do zoning, we're thinking about trying to figure out how to preserve the things that we love about Concord, restore the moral character, and at the same time generate enough potential economic engine to support it. And so there's that constant balance. So I do think that's the place where it happens. Any other comments or questions or concerns?
Dan, I have a couple questions. One is, are these that will all operate as kind of public meetings? So the subcommittees will meet in public session.
That's my understanding, John.
Okay, that all makes sense. And then the second question was, as we kind of raise our hands or get assigned to one of the three committees, I'm assuming that just because you're not on a committee doesn't mean you won't have a voice in those issues.
I would agree with that as well. I mean, I think as we've seen, it's a challenge to get work done in this setting. And
Right.
so my hope and expectation is that by sort of creating that opportunity, people will have more time and to do the deep dive, they'll come back and report. And then the committee as a whole will have an opportunity to weigh in and identify blind spots or further expand, just like I think we seem to be doing very successfully. So.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I, we can figure out this question about the structure of that. I'm hoping that, and I haven't thought about this sufficiently, but sort of in coming into this meeting, I was kind of hoping that there might be an individual among the subcommittee that will, whether we label it a chair or however, whatever seems appropriate, that person becomes the point person at the subcommittee that might come into this meeting, for example, and do a quick report. And that information will hopefully go in both directions.
That all sounds good. Thanks.
Okay, great. All right, well, so if in some respects, as I mentioned, a few folks have given me feedback on the further elaboration of what's going to happen in these subcommittees. So we can go through it now. We don't have to go through it now. If we could also sort of try an attempt at, if there are people that sort of look at how many people want to be in each committee. Are people prepared? Are members prepared to do that? Okay, good. All right. Then I'll start from the top and see if anybody puts their hands up and these things. So the legal government affairs, do we have Lee, Elizabeth, and Mark?
I'm interested as well, Dan.
John, sorry. I always forget to look at the screen. Sorry about that.
By the way, I would be there in person, except when I came through Concord Center this morning, I realized it would take me so long to get back from West Concord. That's better off coming
Well,
by.
it's so funny you say that, John. I ended up just doing a way roundabout and said, I'm not, no way I'm gonna try to make it through there, so I'm with you. All right, so just so I'm clear again, John, Elizabeth, Lee, and Mark. Thank you.
That's a formidable group.
That is a formidable group. Well, the good news is we have lots of formidable groups, I think, members to create that. All right, so land use planning and strategy. I see Scott going around the table. Scott, Peter, Linda, and me.
I'm interested too.
Sorry, Aaron, I did not.
No worries.
I also think that Emily might have emailed over the weekend that that's the one that she was interested.
Okay.
Also.
Okay, well, so, and my expectation, and just so it's clear, I think my hands are gonna be pretty full with the project management piece of it. So I'm interested, that's probably the piece that I'm most interested in, so I'll be not a super active participant in that, but definitely attend. Okay, that's good.
Just review the names here.
Yes, so that's Scott, Peter, Linda, Aaron, and Emily. And I did say me, but I don't want to overwhelm it, so I'll figure out how to do that. And then the final one, community outreach, I happen to know that Patrick is interested in that, so I'll put his name in the ring. Are there other folks? I don't think there is anybody. So. Is there any chance? Aaron, that you would consider helping out in that? I just like some of your, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but you had some very good. And important observations about in previous meetings that I recall.
I'm happy to help. I'd also really be interested in the sort of land use and all of that, as that's sort of my background, but can I do both?
Yes, you can do both.
Okay.
Absolutely can do both. Thank you. And so it's interesting because I think the community outreach in my mind is also something, and I want to get ahead of myself or us, but I could easily imagine some outside help in that category too. So, all right. Well, wow. Well, we are, that is great and quick work. So if there, and I don't need to take a vote on any of that, right? We just, we have it in the minutes and.
Yeah, I think we can.
It's recorded, so some people decide to back out or change, we can repost it.
As far as creating subcommittees, we need to take a vote on that.
Creating them, you might as well.
Okay, so why don't we, I would entertain a motion about the subcommittee.
I would make a motion to create 3 subcommittees, legal government affairs being 1, land use planning, visioning being the 2nd, and community outreach being the 3rd.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I, roll call, Scott,
Yes.
Peter,
Aye.
Elizabeth,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Linda,
Yes.
John,
Yes,
Aaron,
Yes.
and Dan, yes, and Mark, sorry. Save the best for last.
I think it's also probably important to note that, participation in this subcommittees, if this were to operate the way, for example, the finance committee works. Other members of the advisory board could participate, but in terms of having the necessary number of people to meet and do work, we should just define what the membership is. One of the challenges, of course, of having more members is that you need more people to actually get a meeting going. On the other hand, there's probably not as much voting as there is discussion, deliberation, and work to be produced, so these groups can work without a quorum. I know that I mentioned this before, but the Wonders Pond Task Force just recently created some subcommittees and used a document that sort of cheat sheet for how to do subcommittees, and I can get a hold of that and distribute it for people who want to understand how to do that.
That would be awesome, Mark.
We need to approve the minutes of August 19th.
Well, they're not ready to, I don't, right?
Yeah.
Linda said she would have them for the night.
I guess my other thought about this is that I think the main benefit for using the subcommittee structure is it gives us the possibility to be doing at least 3 things at the same time. And so we should probably just focus on how to keep that pipeline full. So right now, I think engagement needs to be really focused on what, if anything, is going to happen, in the aftermath of the September 12th meeting, and defining that. I think legal and government, we should probably be thinking about what resources we need and how we're going to deploy the resources that have been done. And the land use group needs to start really understanding maybe what the visioning exercises are. And I think if we can keep keep in mind what the priorities of these groups are. And then we can sort of flex the groups to work on whatever we think those top priorities are. So I like to think about it like working a project plan and making sure that the critical path is being covered.
And to that end, that those kind of critical paths from the individual subcommittees should make their way to project management so that I can then communicate that. That's a very good point. The other piece of it that always makes me a little bit anxious is I really wish we, as a committee, we have completed the goal setting piece, because I think it is going to inform a lot of our work. I think now that we've sort of jumped out with the subcommittees, I can imagine individual subcommittees could do that and then share that. That might be a way to advance this. The other thing that Patrick and I talked about is a desire to meet with all of the members individually in between. So we're gonna just to try to hear, understand why you're involved in the committee, what you're hoping to achieve with it. And so that I think that would, for me, and I think Patrick, based on our conversation, I think that would be really instructive. So we're hoping to do that series of informal coffees, assuming that's okay. I have to check with the open meeting on how that works, but that's what we'd like to try to do that sooner rather than later. Is that something we can do?
Thought it was whenever two or more gathered in his name, it must be noticed.
Okay,
No, it's two or more committee. Creates a group, but
Yeah.
it needs to be a quorum of the group. That implicates notice, public meeting,
so we,
one on.
okay. All
Do we
right,
know
good.
if there's any requirement that those meetings be held in public buildings, or, could they happen in a cafe, at the library? I mean, is there any requirement there?
When you say that, John, are you referring to the subcommittee or the
I'm
individual?
talking about subcommittees.
Okay,
So for example, if we wanted to meet at Concord Market upstairs so we could enjoy tasty snacks during the meeting, would that be permitted?
I think as long as the public is able to attend. Then, I mean, the notice has to include the time and place where the meeting is going to occur. And then essentially the door has to be open for people that want to observe it. On the Warner's Pond Task Force, I think what the subgroups are doing as a practical matter is meeting on Zoom.
Yeah.
Because that allows for the posting and ensures that anybody who wants to attend can attend. That could also include a physical location, which would be available. So as long as the public has reasonable access to it, that's.
Okay.
I think if you meet in person, it also has to be accessible.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of trying to schedule the meetings that I mentioned with Patrick and myself, should I just sort of send around a notice to everybody, find it when they're available?
Can we take a minute to talk about big picture scheduling, like, is one idea is that it's the subcommittees that are maybe meeting more frequently, a few times a month, and the full committee, the whole board, less frequently. If we've got meetings every single week, you might be burnt out pretty quick. Yeah, but just open to any idea, but how you see it.
I would prefer the description that you said, and I'm thinking about the most recent experience I have with this was when we did the Energy Futures Task Force, the energy plan for the town, and it worked like you just described. The whole group meetings started to become less frequent, maybe once a month or something, and the subcommittees that were doing individual pieces met probably twice a month. So I think that's for me. I think that would probably be my preference. So I don't, and other people have different thoughts on that. Obviously, if the thing about this whole project is things could come out of left field and suddenly we all feel like, you know what, it would be really good to get it on the table. So that would be my prediction. It's a good question. Is there anything else in terms of the subcommittee piece that we should be thinking about or talking about?
How far in advance do we have to let you know so you can notice it?
The latest agendas can be posted as 48 business hour notice.
48.
Don't count the weekends.
Yeah,
Because you don't count weekends, it's just,
yeah.
Public
you're not
sector-
working on.
Public sector doesn't.
So, I mean, correct, everyone correct me with their thoughts on this, but I think hopefully the meeting happens pretty quickly, a meeting. In fact, if it could happen before the 12th, that would be awesome. I don't wanna be unrealistic or put on this undue pressure, but that would be good. And then hopefully in that early meeting, just thinking out loud, there'd be some sort of governance or who's doing what in that so that we could come back maybe, maybe on the 9th, maybe that's too soon, or meeting following the 9th and sort of talk about that. So we know who the point person is.
Yeah, we're not gonna, get to it. I think the issue that you raised in passing is the aftermath of the meeting on the 12th. We need to have a concrete next step to tell the community when we're there. So maybe, if it's possible between now and our next meeting, the community outreach folks could talk to DCAM or the government affairs groups could talk to DCAM about setting up another tour date. Because that would give us something concrete to announce at the public hearing that would, be an outgrowth of the discussions.
Are you talking about a tour open to the public?
Yeah,
I don't know if that is.
but it's worth having a discussion, or at least, them scheduling those drone flyovers they talked about and at least broadcasting those, but we need something concrete coming out of the hearing on the 12th. That's a logical next step to keep people engaged.
I hear your point, and actually what I imagined when I set the agenda was, that we would sort of talk about that and figure out what we want to say. Look at what they're proposing to say in their agenda, and then also, as you saw, there's a piece carved out for us, there's a piece carved out for Mary. Also to talk about that. So, what I'm imagining, Peter, is that we would say, here are the subcommittees that are formed, here is ideally who's the point person. I like what you're saying, taking it a step further, and if we're ready in that meeting to say, oh, by the way, we have our first meeting is scheduled on X date, and the agenda is. Right. And that, I think that would be a great outcome. We also talked about, if I recall correctly, last time, that we would want to, say in that meeting when our first public outreach meeting was gonna be, which may be the subcommittee meeting. And I think that's also, I would guess, is gonna be somewhat informed or influenced by, the ULI discussion. I could imagine that potentially influencing it, so. I think the committee needs to, and Patrick will be here, but he's not yet. No, okay. All right, well, that's great. And is there anything else any other questions or thoughts that people have about that? Okay, so the next thing, well, before I do that, just to give Patrick another couple of minutes to get here, Megan, do you have time for you in spot? It's not on the agenda, and I asked, and I wasn't sure if you had any updates, or I want to at least give you an opportunity to.
Oh, thank you. No, I don't have.
Okay, great. It was not a slight, it was, I thought we were gonna focus on this and then
Yeah.
I realized that, okay, good. All right, so, has everyone had a chance to look at the proposed DCAM agenda? And are there any comments, concerns, observations?
Well, my observation is that I think that the capturing of an hour's worth of public comment, I think an hour's worth of public comments is a good idea.
Mhm.
I just think that capturing that and responding to it, processing it and understanding what issues are raised by it is something that we should, you know, be prepared to receive and respond to. There might be some room for some kind of wrap up afterwards.
But Mark, can I just, what do you, I want to make sure I'm tracking with you. What do you mean by that?
So what I mean, after this, the items that are covered here. People are gonna have the opportunity to step up to the microphone and say whatever's been on their mind for the, call it 6 months since this became news, yeah. And I think it's an important thing for us to be planning to do something with that. And so we should think ahead of time about how we're going to receive that information, how we're gonna make sure it doesn't get lost. And use that to adjust to whatever we do next in terms of community engagement. And I think it's important to be communicating that expectation both before and after those comments are received.
Okay. And I think that's an interesting observation because, and we touched on this the last part of the last meeting. We talked about whether, we wanted to be clear that we're working collaboratively with DCAM and at the same time, if I'm sitting in the audience, I'm confused about who's hearing this and so I think that's an important point. I don't have an answer for that right now.
I mean, my observation is that people are gonna say whatever's on their mind, and some of those things are probably gonna be very much directed at ideas that they have for the town or, directly impact our work. And some of them may in fact be things that are in scope for DCAM, and I think we should both be actively listening and then trying to really take those things almost as action items to be processed and make sure, because I think that the extent to which we recognize that we're actively listening, responding and processing the information that we get in, that builds confidence.
Yep. And setting an expectation early in it, and maybe even even before people start giving comments,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I think that setting expectations is important. We are still really so early in this process. In some ways, I feel like we're not really ready to do anything, to take a lot of action based on input at this point. So I have a couple thoughts. One is it would be helpful to know the bullets that DCAM plans to share in terms of its process and the expectation setting. The other would be that if we really are going to have a good audience, and I think that we probably will, maybe instead of simply having people kind of step up to the mic and say what they think, we might prompt them with a couple of questions. One would be to understand kind of, do they have particular priorities or concerns for the priorities or opportunities they see for the site? And then second would be, any concerns about the process or I guess the process or the outcomes. And it would be kind of interesting to think about almost having a very simple survey instrument available that people could fill out if there are issues on which we'd like to have preliminary input.
Eric?
Yeah, I was gonna add, I assume the meeting will be recorded. Is that
Yeah.
Yes.
true? Okay. And I guess I have maybe a similar comment to John that are we gonna, or is DCAM gonna respond if there are questions, or is this more sort of like, thank you for your comments and there's no response at this point? Because there may be questions that can be responded to, or maybe there's themes that come out that we want to sort of fill out our FAQs section of. I think there's a section of the website that we maybe can answer some questions that may come up repeatedly. and then obviously there will also be sort of opportunities and concerns, as John noted, that we'll need to start to gather, and we can certainly do that from the recording. But I guess I would classify it as there might be kind of things to note, and then a bunch of questions that folks might have about the process, or can they access the land right away, or what things like that might be simple.
That's a great question. I noticed that Paul is on the call. I have sort of an answer, but Paul, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, thanks everyone. Good to see everybody today. This is a great conversation, and I think I can touch on a couple of questions that folks have brought up. Aaron, in response, I think, to your most recent question about like, will we be taking response, or will we be like trying to do it in real time? There may be a little bit of both, but our priority here is hearing from as many people as we can. So like, we're gonna veer towards giving people a set amount of time, say what they need, take it, and then do a comprehensive job of responding as we can, to make sure that we're not wasting the public's talking time with DCAM talking. To John, your point about a survey, we're in the process of developing one right now. We're planning to have both a survey and a way to kind of prompt people's thinking. We're going to have it both in paper format in the room, as well as in a digital format, that those who either prefer digital or who are online can fill in, whether people don't want to get up at the mic, or prefer to think their thoughts out and jot them down. We're aiming to have a multiple inputs version of feedback at this point. So that's 100% in our thinking. And to your question, John, about like what DCAM's like planning to say here, at a broad level, it's not dissimilar to the presentation that we gave to you all several weeks ago. Some of the public has had a chance to hear that. Not everybody has, and we want to make sure that we're level setting for folks. We've heard very clearly, people want to know about the site, people want to know about the process, and I think we intuit from that people may want to know who DCAM is. So I think taking a step back, those are kind of what we're focused on. And then, as people have mentioned, setting up the fact that there are efforts going on at both DCAM and at the town. We're in coordination, we're working together. They're not 100%, like there are town perspectives, town needs, making sure that they have everybody in the crowd has a chance to hear from your own residential leadership there, and point to the exciting work that you all are continuing to move along in this forum and in the subcommittees that I'm happy to see advancing. And then what DCAM is taking on as our process, both what is mandated to us by the legislation that enables this, as well as our other our approach to being as good of stewards of this as we can be.
Paul, will there be any representatives from DOT, or any response to maybe questions about Route 2, or at least what's happening with that study?
There will, I can't say that nobody from DOT will show up and sit in the crowd, but there will not be, this is not a Route 2 study. We're not at this first early stage going to be trying to conflate those. Okay. So that will be very much a hearing, taking, and using that to make sure that we remain coordinated.
Okay. Is there any like line item? Oh, sorry. Is there any like line item that's like DOT is working on this study? Like, I don't even know what the status of any study they may be doing is that would be shared.
Yeah. DCAM is not going to represent what MassDOT is or is not doing.
Peter had a question, but I'll.
Elizabeth, please.
Okay.
Thank you. Responding to your point about collecting this information, I think it's too vague to just say we're going to listen and respond. I think it would be very useful. And Shannon, I'm sorry to give you more work and Patrick more work, but we can capture this in a matrix. They're all going to fall within certain, I would be shocked if most of the comments didn't fall within certain subjects, right? So if we could have that at the meeting afterwards, so we're not all just kind of randomly saying what we think we heard, I think having a central source would be great. And I also wonder whether we should consider having our own handout that has an email address, because I know we talked about setting up an email address to submit comments.
It's set up.
Yeah, so I don't know if we want to have anything else on that handout, whether we want to have a little description of who we are, or if that could be where we put a next step. Our meetings coming up, so I don't know.
And I'm hoping, Paul, you'll be able to share all the survey results with the advisory board.
Yeah, I anticipate that we will, use that collaboratively. We're not trying to hide public opinion.
Elizabeth, I think that's a great point, just to have some kind of a handout that even kind of begins to answer some of the obvious questions, right?
Yeah.
Something like that could actually be kind of the beginning of an FAQ.
Yeah, I think that would be part of it.
I think there is one already started on the town web, like our committee's website page on the town website, but I think it could certainly be expanded.
I mean, there's something about having a physical copy that we're giving out to people who are there.
That's
Yeah.
a good suggestion. All right. Are there any,
Do we want to make that an action to review that handout draft at the September 9th meeting and make sure that we have it ready? And do we want to decide which, is that going to be the outreach group that's going to create that?
that's what I was thinking,
All right.
and yes, I think we should
Okay.
have that as an agenda item.
Boy, sure, Patrick's gonna be really excited about not showing up and getting assigned all this work.
Well, this is what happened.
Yeah.
And so it's,
No, it's a very good suggestion.
I think to Aaron's other point about the Route 2 study, seems to me that maybe that's bringing the, Department of Transportation to the table sounds like legal and government affairs to me, and so that idea has come up before. I think that it is a primary concern of the community, is how are these things going to dovetail together, and so maybe that's where we should be driving with that. Okay.
So what, if I understand you correctly, you're saying that gets
Yeah.
parked under that.
Yeah,
That. legal-
exactly, and I think we will lose us to try to at least be specific about when the first level of engagement around that is. I think that, connects to Linda's concern about a transportation study. I think we understand that the Department of Transportation is going to be primarily interested in the regional impact of whatever happens in the rotary redesign, but I think that as a community, we have a high level of interest in what happens with local traffic flow and local redesign of the transportation, and we need to make sure that the studies that are taking place cover both of those bases, not just the regional issues.
Right, and there's a great deal of integration. I mean, one of the things I've been thinking about would be, as we deconstruct and demolish the former prison, what do we do with all of that material? There may be a way we can talk to DOT and get them to draft a contract that incentivizes reusing some of the material in the construction or reconstruction of the rotary and all of the adjacent roadways. So that'd be a sustainability win, a reuse win, stuff get kept out of the landfill and maybe reducing costs a little bit.
All right, so are there any other comments on their proposed agenda? You can. And what I'm thinking about on the point where it talks about the MCI Advisory Board greeting. If we do what you suggested, Elizabeth, then, but maybe we just do very quick. here's who the individuals are. Here's who our subcommittees are. And oh, by the way, we put it together, because hopefully everyone has seen it, this thing, this handout. Is there anything else we want to be saying in that, or will we be ready to say at that point?
Dan,
Yes,
can I make a comment as far as what I expect my role is here on the agenda? And I might inform the greeting from the board. I see my role here as, first of all, welcoming the residents of Concord, but also explaining to people the role of the MCI advisory board vis-a-vis DCAM. And I would be relying quite a bit on the charge that the select board wrote. And I would like to make sure that whatever we use as a handout is consistent with the messages that I'll be giving.
Maybe the handout should include the charge. Right?
Yes, I was thinking that.
Yeah.
We have a charge, it's. We can use it.
that's a good idea.
It could list the members right there too. Subcommittees.
Work with what we have. No further. Okay. Thanks, Mary. So. Yeah, and then the reality is we'll just be at the beginning of, we've done a lot, but at the same time, we'll just be at the beginning of making this work happen. So we don't have a whole lot to report in that regard. But as people have said, I think most importantly is sort of establishing a realistic understanding of the timeline. I think that's probably going to put, perhaps, I'm hoping that that's going to create some ease among residents. That there is time to do this. Patrick, welcome. Good to see that you. Peter did his best to try to protect you, so I'm having a whole bunch more work, but you now have a bunch of work that you don't even know about. Just to quickly update you, we did end up, because I wasn't sure about when you were going to be here, and we ended up flip-flopping the agenda. So the good news is that the committee did very good work, very quick work, identified the 3 subcommittees that are pretty much fall in line with that last memo. And also people raised their hand and expressed interest in the various committees, and they're generally well represented or distributed. I put your hand up because you and I talked about it for the community outreach group. So you can be angry or happy with me for that.
Well, I would say deserve it no matter the case, since I wasn't here to speak for myself.
Well, Peter did, as I said, Peter said, he did try to make that point. But it's good. And what I also, I'm not exactly sure of the timing when you came in, but a suggestion was made, which I think is a great suggestion, that we would develop a handout for that meeting, so that the community understands who we are, what we're supposed to be doing. Try to identify some of the resources that are available, which I think is going to be very helpful. So, and we are going to try to get it. Well, I guess we won't try. It will happen. We'll have a version of that for our September 9th meeting to finalize.
Yeah, Patrick, just so you know more explicitly, what we talked about was the handout should include the committee charge, identify the advisory board members and the subcommittees that we assigned ourselves to earlier today, and that'll be in Shannon's minutes that come out.
Perfect.
Yeah, and Shannon also pointed out that I think we have the beginning of the FAQ on the town.
Yeah, there's one on the website right now, and actually me, Donna and Mimi have been going through it together, trying to update it. So that should, work well with the timeline of having it included for a handout.
And she also has a email contact for the committee that should be included in that one pager.
Yes.
And the last thing that you probably didn't hear, but I think will make you happy, is Paul mentioned that they were planning, so a question was raised by one of the board members, suggestion, I think it was John, about potentially having either some prompts or, things to sort of seed the conversation with the public, and also doing a survey. DCAM is developing some level of survey that will be collected in that. And then the final thing was Elizabeth suggested that we, you, me, and whoever else necessary would collect the comments and organize them from the public. So that it might be a little bit easier to manage. Did I get the right second day?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So with that, you're up to date.
Perfect.
And
Can I say one more thing? A question about the survey for Paul, I guess. Paul, it would be helpful if we could see what you plan to ask in terms of questions. And if there are things that we have a particular interest in, I think here our interests are pretty well aligned. So you'll probably cover stuff that we're interested in, but just if we could see it in advance, and we may want to add a question or two, just to ensure we kind of take full advantage of the opportunity given the audience we should have.
Yeah, happy to do that. I've been talking with Mark and Shannon a little bit about whether we all jump on the agenda for your 9/9 meeting ahead of that 9/12 meeting, and maybe come out and see you guys in person again. Happy to talk that through. I think we'll also certainly kick that by Mark ahead of time. And I think Dan has been joining our working sessions occasionally as well. So we'll make sure that, you know, you all know what's coming on that. I also want to point out, like, we're thinking of this as an initial survey to kind of seed the ground for all of our future work. We're not seeing this as the only survey opportunity during this process either. You know, we think that we're trying to keep this tight and, you know, evening oriented, so that people are thinking, as you said, like seeding a little bit of the conversation for this evening, and then making sure we capture that from as many people as we can, whether they're able to be there in person, online, or just know about it. I suspect that as we go along, there will be an opportunity for, you know, a more in-depth survey, you know, as we tailor that as well collectively. So hopefully that makes sense.
That does. Thanks.
So Paul, am I hearing that the survey would be done live on the evening on the 12th?
So yeah, I shared it with the rest of the group, Patrick, thinking of two things, having like a short handout that, you know, we want to hear from people in the way that they're comfortable speaking. So whether that is at the microphone or on, you know, a Zoom comment that we'll be moderating, whether that is writing stuff down and giving us back a sheet of paper while they're in the room, or whether that is filling out the same set of questions that'll be on a sheet of paper on Zoom. I don't think, you know, not on Zoom, in an online form. I don't think we're going to be like, you know, taking hot takes and trying to set out like 42% of people say something. I think we're looking for a little bit more nuanced questions than that at this moment. But yeah, something that would be able to be filled out in pretty short order during the public hearing, or, you know, shortly thereafter.
Okay, got it. I would think, just not to problem solve this too much, and apologies if you already discussed it. I think that if there is going to be opportunity for comment outside of just the kind of in-person session on the 12th, getting notice out to folks in town in advance would probably avert some negative feedback if it is like a survey that's open and closed with little warning. So I would think that, you know, shortly after, like in the next week or so, we'd want to somehow get that communication out to residents.
That's a helpful point. Thank you. I will take that back and figure out how to best do that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, right, like, especially if it's only going to be open for 24 hours or something that's quite short, right? Typically a survey like this, you'd expect to be open for 2 weeks. As someone who runs a lot of
so right, the 2-3 week one is, what we're thinking a community engagement consultant will probably facilitate going forward.
Yeah.
So maybe it is just a, during the event type of thing. We'll talk that through.
Yeah, I was just thinking about it because you could imagine people might panic, right? If they find out that they missed the survey, even if that's not at all what it's intended to be.
Yeah, one of the key messages of the meeting on the 12th, and I think what I put in the draft agenda that you've all seen in there, is that like this is very clearly not the only engagement point, and that's a key message that we're sharing with folks, that this is the first time we're having a major community engagement public hearing session. There will be more. We would love to be, I think it was Lee who suggested last week, having an advisory board led engagement session on the calendar in the next 30 days thereafter or something. If that's something that will exist and can be pointed to already with very, specific opportunity, we would love to make sure that that's clearly highlighted. But, defer to you on the arrangement. I know that the community outreach subcommittee was just officially formed today. So.
Got it.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a catch-22 in my mind. I mean, I think there's something useful about sampling the people that actually take the time to show up and hear their early thoughts. And then using that to potentially inform a more developed and thorough. On the other hand, I think Patrick, you raised a really good point. People could get anxious. Shoot, I wish I knew about that. Or anybody that's at home watching it may not raise it.
Yeah, perhaps we title it initial community survey.
Yeah, it might even be something short of a survey and more like a meeting questionnaire or something.
Fair. Right.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Paul. Do we? And then just, I think I know this, but is the next, you had mentioned it, the next Friday meeting, is that this Friday we're having one? Okay, so we're alternating that. We got a little bit messed up because of this meeting, but, okay. All right,
Wait, what was that?
So, yeah,
Sorry.
the staff gets together with you, yeah.
I admit, I'm sorry, I was.
It helps us. They bring coordination.
If it's possible, I'd like to hear whatever information is available about the status of the wastewater treatment plant sale or studies or whatever.
Today, no.
At our next meeting.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. We should, by the next meeting, we will have passed the 30 days. So there should be an offer.
So, Mark, you say we should be able to look at the offer and maybe have the engineering department comment, or?
The legislation required that the wastewater treatment facility be offered to the town within 30 days. So our understanding is that they're working on that. Our further understanding is that offer is meant to be as friendly and, full of contingencies as possible to allow us to complete the work that's going on to evaluate it. And that when town staff is ready, they will come and brief us on their evaluation of both the facility and their understanding of what's in the offer. There's already been some preliminary discussions to try to, if you play out that the town has 6 months to respond to that. But that doesn't quite get us to town meeting. Which is when which would be required if we were actually going to buy it. So various contingencies are being worked out. That would allow us not to necessarily have to have a special town meeting. Something like leasing it for a period of time that would allow the bridge or. Those, thoughts along those lines that would allow us to hopefully. Process. That acquisition in regular order. I think there's a lot of great questions to be had. I think we're just waiting on. Our staff to evaluate that.
Thank you.
I think that covers the DCAM agenda, unless you know some other thoughts on that. So we're a little bit ahead of schedule, which is unusual and good, maybe. So the next item would be the outlook for future meetings. The last time we talked about the ULI TAP, we asked Emily to look into the possibility of pushing it a little later into our work a little later this fall. So I don't think we have an update, and Emily's not here, so. And then we touched on the discussion with Mass DOT regarding the Route 2 corridor. There's a bullet here for trying to, when I thought of this, I was kind of hoping that we might bring in one of the principals from the Envision Concord 30, the West Concord Master Plan and Warner's Pond Planning Committee, just to sort of hear what their concerns are firsthand. So invite them to a future meeting. I know John participated pretty actively in the Envision Concord 2030. So maybe that's, I don't know that, John, you want to be in a position to do that, but what are people's thoughts about that generally? Is that an efficient and effective way to get that, to understand? Rather, my thought was, instead of each one of us meeting through, in some cases, our version. So, John.
I was saying, yeah, it's a thick report. Elizabeth was there for the whole thing. So maybe Elizabeth and I could kind of collaborate on providing some kind of introduction if she's willing.
Elizabeth Hughes or more?
Hughes, sorry.
Okay.
I forgot about the whole thing. And
Yeah.
that was
I do think it's such an important document, kind of, reflecting the town's priorities and guiding a lot of what we're doing as a town, that it is important that all of us have an understanding of it.
It's an excellent piece of work, and that's my, without, the depth of understanding, John, that you and others have in it, it's hard to, we can read executive summaries. On the other hand, I feel like 5-10 minutes of something, I don't mean to minimize it, but 5 to 10 minutes of somebody's direct involvement in that can really, and then be able to respond to questions we may have, I think will be perhaps the most efficient way of doing that.
I'm trying to recall, I can see Elizabeth Hughes over there, kind of behind Lee. I think that's Elizabeth. I'm trying to recall if we had kind of some concise summary, kind of digest of the overall report that we put together, but maybe we can kind of put our hands on some of that stuff and figure out the best way to share that with the committee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there a PowerPoint or something that was done to present to town meeting or for the planning board for adoption or something? That could be dusted off.
There must have been.
Before COVID. Well, that's a great question, Peter, if it does exist, but there's a couple other ones, as I mentioned. There's actually a fourth one, which I didn't put down there, and that is the Energy Futures Task Force plan. I think it would be, given the scale of this site and given the concerns that I know Peter and probably other members have, I think it would be good just to, and clearly it did not envision that. But we've all heard about the concerns, I think, that the life plan has about the impact that this could have on their operation. So it might be good to think about that.
Just another one that might fall within this category is the housing production plan.
Yes.
Limited that section of town.
Yep. Right, I did think of that, for what it's worth, and I sort of imagined, I thought I remembered that the Envision Concord 2030 plan dealt with that, Elizabeth? Is that true, or incorporated?
Which is that?
The housing plan, the housing production plan, was that incorporated or as part of the Envision 2030?
It was part of that, the housing piece in that, at that time.
That's what I think, right, exactly, at that time, that's, okay, but it's still, it's a good point. And it probably warrants being called out. Yeah, so I don't sense a lot of resistance from people doing that. Obviously, the people that might have to do that are not in the room, so. And I don't even really know how to organize that other than sort of looking to Shannon and or other people that were involved in it that might be able to gently convince someone to sort of do that. But I think that would be great, because do it once, we're all here. I find that this group is great and very facile on their feet, asking really good questions, so it just seemed like a good way to immerse ourselves in that.
Yeah, I think it's really a good idea to engage with Envision Concord. I will say that as we did a fairly deep dive on it in the Warner's Fund Task Force and found that there were a couple of, when we tried to look at it through that lens, we also found some omissions and some time has passed, not that long, but 2018 is still a little bit. And so we found a couple of aspects that I think would have bearing on it, because we are talking about this environment, this specific area of town, that it's worthwhile doing. So maybe one way to do that might be to ask for, or to kind of pair it with a little bit of look at what's going on in Warner's Pond at the same time, and what we specifically found in that group related to Envision Concord, that are some gaps, let's say, in that lens that I think could be important to consider here when we do our vision.
Okay, so that your observation about the gaps and the realization of that is more about applying that lens process to, okay. Not, and also specific to Warner's Pond.
Yeah,
Okay.
but right.
The observations that you identified.
Yeah, we came up with a few things that, 6 or 7 years on down the road seem a little bit more, little more important, and also the specifics of what we were talking about sustainability and the ecology are interesting when you try and, put a recreation lens on it, put an open space lens on it. So though I think it might be worthwhile for us to plan to hear that as well.
Yeah, well, that's what I didn't say quite as succinctly as you did, but that's what I was imagining with that EFTF report. Because that's clearly, now that MCI, which is a huge consumer of power,
Right.
is gonna not be part of it.
Yeah, specifically what we did was we tried to use it to create a criteria for evaluating the various options about what to do with Warner's Pond. So you could take that exact thing and say, okay, well, what happens if you use Envision Concord to try and evaluate the alternatives of what to do with MCI? And we found that it was useful, but maybe not sufficient.
Okay, so, when I look to anyone here, because I don't have the answer to it, but how would be an effective way to either identify that person or reach out, find some means of doing that? And now I'm starting looking at you, Elizabeth,
Or
to
Warner's Pond, or?
well, Warner Pond and Vision 2030, the HBP, West Concord's master plan, the EFTF. I mean, it's.
About DOP's in it, who's gonna do that?
It could be, Scott, it's an interesting,
Is that us or is that?
it's state.
Is that Paul helping with that, or is that us doing it on our own with DOT, or how does that work?
Well, I certainly think, DOT was actually the bullet above it, but it's absolutely related. You can't do the things without it. So maybe that is just a deep dive in terms of trying to understand.
And really, this development's at the mercy of DOT, because it dictates the egress and ingress for the site. And you can't plan a site if you don't know what the exit ramps are gonna be and anything like that. So we're at the mercy of that.
So I think the answer to your first question is yes, that should be a part of it. Sorry.
This is, just in terms of this list that we've come up with.
Yeah.
Under the, budget, DCAT has groups that they're supposed to consult with. And we have some representatives here from some of those groups, like the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. Concord Business Partnership, ORS, they're listed here. They're not on this, but it seemed to me that we might want to consult with those groups, and at some point, when they are prepared and ready to comment, I think that we should invite them as well to give us their input. Otherwise, we would be trailing whatever DCAM's doing, and we should be representing some of those groups and at least inform this to their interests.
I agree with that. If you recall early on and back in the early part of the summer, we identified the list of stakeholders and a lot, right? And a lot of that, I'm, in my mind, it doesn't mean it's correct, but in my mind, I was separating these. Be very careful with my choice of words. It feels like these are sort of big picture planning kind of initiatives and thought process, and it's not to say that the other groups aren't, they probably have their ideas, but I'm trying to imagine the timing and how we get this information in and processing it. So it's not, maybe it is the way to do it is just sort of put it all in, but I could also imagine it sort of overwhelmed by it. And so
Maybe make sure that they're aware of the 12th meeting, all those groups.
that's a good point.
And so at least we reached out to you to use our initial information session, and we want you to be a part of it. And so you can educate what's going on.
Do we have a representative MAPC? That's what that.
Maybe that might be something Shannon could do, just come up with a list of contacts for all of the groups that we
have
identified, so that the committee has some opportunity to engage on a.
That's included in the legislation or the general stakeholders list.
Well, maybe the stakeholders and you and Patrick could identify stakeholders that we want to make sure we contact on a regular basis so that they are engaged to the extent that they want to be, or
No, it's a good point.
and then I like your idea that priorities, that's your job. It's great. Thank you.
It's really a function of the limitation that.
I was reading what you were saying about these groups kind of differently from that Mass DOT conversation. So to me, you're trying to get all of the master planning that's been done in town, kind of just in our heads. So we have some idea about visioning. So DOT is hugely important, obviously, but I see it as separate from what you're talking about doing. Yeah, so to what you're saying, I know you said executive summaries aren't as helpful, but maybe they would be helpful for at least to start with. And then I don't know if we follow up with questions to representatives from those groups, if those representatives are even still around.
So what I can tell you, we'll start with the Envision Concord plan. I'll coordinate with John, to Peter's point, see what presentation was presented, would have been the planning board and then the select board who had to adopt the plan. See what there might be, I don't recall, and I can coordinate with John on getting whatever information he needs to be able to fill this committee in. On the town's website for the Envision Concord plan, there is an executive summary and all the chapters are posted. If somebody wants a printed copy of the Envision Concord plan, I know at least planning board members, I don't know if Board of Appeals members got one, but we do still have some printed copies left. if everybody wants, if you just send me an email and, I'll get you a printed copy. For the, Warner's Pond Task Force, I, believe it would be reaching out to the co-chairs and Delia Kay, Natural Resources Director. And they can, you can touch base with them on that one. For the housing production plan, my suggestion would probably be to reach out to Liz Russ, the Director of the Regional Housing Services Office. That's who we coordinated with to have the plan updated. Before working, you can speak to this, but we were working on a supplemental update since the last one, because there, short amount of time, a lot has changed, so that's really great. But I think Liz Russ could be a good contact for that one. And then for the West Concord master plan, the West Concord Advisory Committee is a subcommittee to the planning board. Currently, the West Concord Advisory Committee is looking at the Envision Concord action items list and discussing that and trying to come up with an update on where they are from the master planning side of things. But there isn't anybody on that committee that was there when that first plan was done. I wasn't with the town either, so that plan is much older. But they are going through and looking at, at least the committee is updating the action items list from the Envision Concord plan with a lens to West.
And the contact person there would be,
Myself and then the chair.
Okay.
You can just send me an email and I can forward it to the chair.
So I guess from my point of view, it's maybe a little bit time consuming for us to hear from all those people. Maybe we just first get summaries and just know what's out there, but like you said, it's pre-COVID, but Envision, I mean, who knows? But if we at least have something to look at as a group and then decide if we want to go forward from there, if that makes sense.
I understand why you're suggesting it. I feel like, I think maybe to the last point that Elizabeth was making, or made on a couple of the items. They're not static documents, right? Or the ideas behind them are not static. And so having somebody, if they can be identified, and maybe we do like a hybrid of both. We like you suggested, we read through it and then invite them in and say, just give us the 5 minutes of.
Yeah, and maybe we invite the planning board, if the planning board is working on it and the zoning board, maybe that's a better place to start. I don't know.
But yeah, I would also suggest, so at least for the planning board, every year they go through that action items list from Envision Concord. And so I can forward that to Shannon to forward to the rest of the committee. But then I think it was 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago. The select board asked every board and committee to give them an update to the action items list from the plan. So Shannon, I don't even know how you would go about finding that. But I think it was only 2 years ago. Well, the zoning board isn't a border. Yeah, I don't think you're a border committee, but it was planning board, public works commission, light plant. I want to say it was like 2 years ago. Because we weren't here 2 years ago, were we?
I'm about 2 years,
So it might have been right before you got here then.
I'm sure we can track it down.
Yeah, so every board and committee was supposed to do that and update that, so that might also really be a good idea.
Peter, just before you, just have a follow-up question. Where does the integration of all those aspirations, is that through the planning board or your coordination meetings with the department?
So I think when the select board asked, that was the last time there was like a full town-wide coordination. So for, at least for the planning division, we go through and update that list for the 7, well, then it was 8 boards and committees that we support. So
Yeah, and I'm thinking, Scott sent, and I think it was included in the package, I can't remember, but Scott raised a question about, geez, is it possible, and what sort of impact could this project have on our ability, safety personnel, fire, and, it's a good question.
More apparatus, more, a larger, firehouse, which, because we have a very small firehouse.
Right. and
So also like thinking what's gonna happen too.
Right, so that to me that's what I'm meaning by the integrations, clearly, I don't know, if that's Megan's realm or the town.
So I know, Scott is, and a couple other board members have talked about that financial impact side of things. And I think that conversation is a little bit similar to the MBTA communities. A vision won't give you that information. Zoning isn't gonna give you that information. Once zoning is in place, you may be able to do some type of, impact analysis, worst case development scenario. And
So I'm just thinking about the
come up
cost,
with
I was thinking about all the costs that might be brought on by this development, that we would have to burden our town, and that's why, we've already dismissed the sales partnership agreement, so I'm just thinking all the costs are gonna potentially come up after we take ownership of it.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically asking for a fiscal impact analysis of the potential scenarios that
Yes.
might arrive out of the
Yes.
zoning. And, like how many school kids.
Yes, exactly.
All of that stuff, but also what the taxes that
Yeah.
redevelopment
That's-
might produce. And that way we can weigh, well, maybe we want another 10,000 more square feet of office space. Or
That's exactly
versus
what I'm thinking.
that type of stuff. Yeah,
And
that's all good. I just want to sort of circle back, Mark, you
before
said that.
we do that, Peter, so you're.
That's what I want to be, my
Yes.
charge.
And that's in this, in my mind, that's in this
I
as
agree.
of today, okay.
Have you done that
Sorry,
before?
Peter.
So you-
Yeah, I know how to supervise hiring someone to do it.
Oh, okay, that's even better.
Well, I mean, essentially what that is, that boils down to a criteria under which various development or redevelopment schemes are going to be judged. So in the abstract, what we're, if we understand if we did 100% single family houses, we'd get one impact on town services, and if we did 100% commercial development, we'd get a different impact, and something in between, or something that doesn't look like that is also going to have its impact. So I think that it makes sense to try to develop a criteria through which we can evaluate the different proposals, options that become apparent. I guess what I wanted to say about all of this is that it seems to me that, circling back to how do we process things like Envision Concord, the West Concord master plan and things like that. I'd like to think that that's kind of what the land use subgroup is going to be about, is to try and figure out, what decisions have we made in the past and which ones need updating in what form. And if we think that something like a new master plan needs to be developed for West Concord, we know the West Concord Advisory Committee is considering that question right now. There's no harm in it, and asking them to come to the land use group committee and say where they stand on that, and try and understand how we can take advantage of those things. I think that's supposed to be the strength of this group, is we really sourced it from a lot of different areas, so that we can hopefully get the best of the activities that are already going on, and figure out how to integrate them, and then be smart about what resources we're allocated to.
Peter, did you finish?
So I just wanted to chip back in with you, Mark. You said that the Waters Pond group did an analysis using Envision Concord. Did they just look like the West Concord Advisory Group, look at the priorities and try and apply them across to?
Right.
All right.
Yeah, and then we actually developed a set of criteria coming out of that, similar to what I was just talking about, through which creates an evaluation rubric for the three things. We're basically, we've decided that we're looking at three different things. Is there gonna be a dredging project? Is there gonna be a dam removal project? Is there gonna be some kind of management plan that doesn't involve either of those two things, at least not right off the bat? And so the plan is to then take those criteria that we teased out of things like Envision Concord and the recreation strategy plan, things like that, and say, okay, how do these proposals actually stack up, or what do we need to know in order to be able to evaluate those proposals in this sort of a way, so that hopefully that group's responsibility is to go back to the NRC and say, we think you should do this. And so that's why there's a parallel.
John, did you have a?
No,
All right, let's see, so we're 3 minutes away from 1:30. The other, well, I guess there's no, I don't see any public comments.
Yeah.
Any public comments on Zoom? See anyone raising their hand? Okay, all right, great. Well, thank you, everybody. And I will see you, we'll see you on the 9th. And the 12th.
In subgroups before.
Oh, sorry, what?
In subgroups.
And it's subgroups before that, yes, and yeah, these are all in my process. I will, or do I need to do that? I will accept the motion for adjournment.